Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our exclusive Global Leading Voices webinar campaign. We are delighted to have you join us here today. Please be informed that if you have any questions during the presentation, you may type them into the question box in your control panel. The presenter will answer your questions at the end of the presentation accordingly. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to our presenter, who will begin shortly.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this new session. Some of you are in advance, so very much welcome to another one. As announced on the agenda, we will be looking into the Cmmc, which is a Cybersecurity Maturity Program. It's a quite interesting topic, as we will explain today, how to implement cybersecurity and information security. And the interesting part of the program is that it is based on some other best practices, and we would like to show you how you can use that approach also for your information security and, of course, for your privacy management systems. What we will do first is to give you a bit of an introduction what Cmmc actually is, where it comes from, how it's based, and how it's done. And we will have a quick walkthrough of the Cmmc component, which is actually based on the manual that has been launched with the Cmmc. And as also announced, Erwin Gernhardt is joining me today to discuss a bit more on the technical details. So we will explain you in detail also what are the different areas that you should implement to get the Cmmc implemented. And main topic of today, of course, is also the maturity of that one. And the program offers quite some interesting insight how to use that maturity to grow your defense in cybersecurity. As there is an obvious link also to the Cmmi, the Capability Maturity Index implementation, we will close down the session for today before we go to the questions. To give you a bit of feedback how you can actually use that approach also for your ISO 27001 implementation. So that's the agenda for today. And before we dive actually into the session, you will see also that the slide deck is quite large. We only have an hour, and some of the slides we will quickly go through, but of course they are available after the session for download, so you can easily look into them. Many of them have also clickable links, so you can also recap a few of the things of the sessions, or if you want to visit the previous sessions, they're also in the slide deck. We will not run through these slides in detail. It's there for reference. Let's get started on the practical things. As we did last time, and we will also do it for this session, we have published already a collateral page. So on LinkedIn, you will see there's a link for this page, and all the questions will get an answer due to the time limitations of this session. We might not be able to respond to all of them during the session itself, but you will anyway get an answer on your questions. So we will get a collection of the questions for everyone to see, and we will post these answers also on the LinkedIn page. On that link page, there is some additional material on reference material that you can use to implement or to assist on understanding the Cmmc in detail. So there's some more stuff, more practical stuff, clickable links, usable documents that you will find in the collaterals page. I will come back to that one later on. Right. For ease of use, yeah, there are some terms that we will see, and to avoid any confusions with the ISO standards, I will refer to the ISO 27001 as ISMS, Information Security Management System. And the privacy part, which is the new standard launched in 2019, is the PIMS Privacy Information Management System. It's less of importance for this session, but you will clearly see the links how to implement these sessions. So I hope that you see some added value in using the maturity system also for the previous sessions in that sense. Also very important, we will focus today on the NIST standards. It's a National Institute for Standards and Technology. I will fix the typo when we publish the slide decks. But that's the main focus for today. And of course, it's a main feed or a main program actually where the Cmmc is referring to. So it might be very useful to have a look at it. And I also refer back to the last session we had together with Erwin, where we matched the ISMS and the PIM system with the NIST implementations, and you will see that we will continue to build actually on that knowledge from previous sessions. Right. What we will not do as before, that we will not discuss in detail the ISMS or the PIM systems. It's still very useful to know how it works with the chapter and the clauses and how the implementation is done, because lots of the things you will see from the Cmmc cyber maturity is still applicable to the ISMS system, and that's mutual recognizable, and in that sense we discussed it before in the previous sessions. Also keep in mind that if we refer to ISO 27000, please consider it as a series of documents. The certifiable standard, of course, is ISO 27001. Since 2019, we have a second one, which is the PIM, so the Privacy Management System. But be aware there are some additional standards like the 32, 35, which you might see that some interesting mapping is also available to the NIST or the Cmmc standards. I will not go too much into detail, but be aware this is a bit of the background on the setup, right? Again, I would like to invite you to visit the previous sessions, because we will explain in these the previous sessions in what is PIMS, what is ISMS, how do you implement it, how do you compare it to the NIST standards in that sense, and is a kind of a basic knowledge that you should have to understand or to see the value in the Cmmc in that sense, and you will see lots of common factors actually in that ones, and reusability is a nice feature of all these platforms. Right, so let's go to the topic of today. We will discuss the Cmmc, which is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, and it's launched by the Department of Defense, and it's very important to understand where is it sourced, because of this source and the way that it is handled, there are some specific features which we'll discuss later on in the session also, like the audit, for example, which makes a strong distinction between the Cmmc, the NIST standards, the ISO standards. And just before we go into the technical details, I will quickly have a reference table also, is what are the main differences between these models. The Cmmc in the initial version 1 has been launched in end of January last year, pretty close to 1 year now. Currently we're working, or actually the version 1.02 is available, and the purpose of that one is actually for the US Department of Defense, is to set a few standards or expected guidelines and implementations by contractors, vendors that are working with the Department of Defense. So the expectation thresholds are quite important. That does not mean that it's specifically and only available to contractors or people that are working with the Department of Defense. The good news is that it's reusing a lot of common practices, standards already available, and that makes the approach of the Cmmc, including the audit and certification part of it, makes it very usable also for other purposes, even international level. Although you must be aware that, of course, it's in US flavor, built into the program. The requirements are very strongly based on US Department of Defense, but you can reuse it, and that's the interesting part of that one. Of course, if you're a vendor or a contractor which is working with the Department of Defense, this will be a very important part of a program they need to comply to. And the main purpose on that one is also explained as you will be able to find on the internet. I have added the reference links of the frameworks also. You will see that actually the program has launched in January and has been moving very rapidly into a mature program. I will explain a bit of the acronyms that have been used here also, because there is a third-party assessor program. There's also a program for certification that I will explain in a few seconds, which is called the C3PAO. So it's not Star Wars, but actually it's the assessment organization. And also very important, there is an accreditation body linked to this program. So it's pretty similar to what is happening, what has been happening for years already in the ISO level. So you will recognize a lot of the approaches that are similar. That's very nice to compare also to the ISO standards. The goal ultimately is that to start rolling out the program and to make sure that actually that if you want to do business with the Department of Defense or American organizations, that you will need to get a certification to certify actually for the program in a certain level. And that's the interesting part of the Cmmc. They have built in a maturity systems, which actually is based on the Cmmi, and I will quickly discuss what the Cmmi is. You know, the 5-number level 1 to 5, which indicates how mature and how well managed your system is. Be aware that, as I mentioned, Cmmc on itself is an American approach, an American framework, so it uses a lot of the NIST standards I mentioned over here. Lots of them are already updated, so be aware that, for example, the SP 853, which we discussed in the last session, is now available to revision 5, although that I would suspect that one of the next updates of the Cmmc, they will update their references too. Also for the SP 800-171, they refer the B version here, which is beta, which is already replaced by a new standard. So, but just consider it as a general link to the principles. And also very interesting, we have discussed it before, also are the sys controls, which is a very common framework also for implementing security in cybersecurity. A very well-known organization that actually offers also some hardening guidelines also for your system. So it's very interesting that they considered actually existing frameworks, well-used frameworks, actually to plug in this method. Right? Be very aware that the Cmmc is reusing a lot of standards, best practices, NIST, and the interesting part of that one is that you can actually extend these approaches that the Cmmc is explaining to also to your ISO principles. So by default also for your ISO 27001, and you will quickly realize if Erwin explains the technical details that lots of these implementations and measures can be reused in a more global way of information, right? Good. Just a quick high-level explanation before we deep dive into the technical implementations. Again, it's cybersecurity maturity, so it's focusing on a subset of measures from information security. Information security, in essence, so the ISO 27001 is a broader framework, and the Cmmc is looking at 43 capabilities, which are divided in 70 capability domains, which we will discuss also or explain with some highlights in the sessions. And you will see actually that one of the core explanations also in the Cmmc is 5 levels of maturity, and you will certainly recognize the Cmmi in this. So level 1 to level 5 with optimal security and that one. In essence, We will have 171 controls, just for your comparison. In the ISO 27001 ISMS controls, we have 114. You can compare actually that the Cmmc is defining quite some expectations also for putting your security correctly. We picked, of course, a few of these slides and the approaches and the diagrams directly from the manual. So you will see also that the main guide for the CMMC is well organized, has a clear overview on a few things. What we will see actually, the model that is being displayed in the guide is this divided into various domains, and very important also as explained by the ISMS system, is that if you implement security, it's not only about technology. So the CMMC model spends a lot of time also in explaining processes and requirements also on process level, and will divide these processes and expectations into capabilities. And will not only talk about technical practices, but also process practices. And this is also the part that we will explain later on. You will find in the guide 17 domains, and if you compare it to the previous sessions, where we discussed actually the SB 853 revision 5, freshly published, you will quickly see that actually there's quite an important overlap, but still the CMMC is mainly focusing on cyber. So you will see that some of the parts that are available in the 853 guide, remember 450 something pages in there, that are some regions and technical sessions being reused, but not all of them, and that makes that CMMC more easily to implement. But be aware that if you want to have a full compliance program based on the NIST 800 series 53 or ISO 27001, there are some of the areas that you will need to add to the CMMC, but for a starter guide and to start implementing cybersecurity, it's a very interesting approach on a few things, right? We already mentioned that there were some levels implemented also in that maturity program, and we go from level 1, level 2, level 3 to level 5, and this will probably ring a bell if you have been looking into the Cmmi before. And level 1 is a basic implementation, usually reactive, while level 2 you start documenting your processes. In level 3, more focusing on the Cmmi, you will see it's called managed, and this is more or less the minimum level that is required if you think about an ISO 27001 implementation. Level 4 is measured, meaning that you will have some metrics, and based on these metrics you do some reviews, and of course based on the process level, level 5 is optimizing, meaning that you're using the metrics to optimize your system in a continuous way. The CMMC has placed a bit of different naming standards in this case, because of course CMMC is about cybersecurity, and we start off with some basic cyber hygiene. We grow into good cyber hygiene level 3, and with some advanced, progressive, and proactive cyber security management, you will end up in level 5. And Aaron will explain in the technical details later on what's expected for these different levels. You will also see that if you move from one level to another, there are some additional controls. Be aware that the dispersion of how the controls are implemented is not always equally added. You will see later on that some of the levels are being added in the later stage. So some of the practices will come in a different way, and it's very important to know that these additional practices, for example, in the dark blue blocks, for example, are spread over a few levels, and we will explain more in technical detail what these level will comprise. Right. Very important to know, which is the main difference with the NIST and best practices, that the CMCC is actually certification based, and they developed an accredited audit system for this, which is pretty similar to what ISO has, but not for NIST. And so they reuse quite some interesting features from the NIST, and they reuse the accreditation system pretty similarly to the ISO 27000 or the ISO in general as important. Again, also be aware that the Cmmc is sourced from the Department of Defense, while the NIST best practices system and framework is actually handled and managed by the US Department of Commerce in that sense, right? Also very important to put the frameworks next to each other and to compare them is that the CMC is highly focusing on cyber, while the NIST and also the ISO standards and best practices are more broader in any way, using risk management, information security management. So the CMC is in many cases just a subset of that information, and for that reason I also added a table to compare actually very easily the various frameworks. Again, keep in mind CMCC and NIST are actually using US region, so US based, and while ISO is an international best practice, of course lots of these best practices, even on international level, use original documentation from the NIST, from US standards, from British standards and international standards, so it's a combination of a few things. CMCC is mainly focused on cybersecurity, while the NIST and the ISO have a more best practice on other ranges, including information security, privacy, where of course there's a very important framework also sourced in the NIST in that sense. Also the level of detail we explained in previous sessions, more specifically the SB 853 is highly detailed. You can get a lot of sources and information from that framework, while the CMCC is actually focused only on cybersecurity, lower details, easy to understand, and the ISO 27000 series, for example, is rather a high-level framework, governance-based, and you will not find too much of details actually how to implement information security privacy in the ISO standards, although that we of course have some specific guidelines, including this 2732 for cybersecurity, right? Again, very important difference also, the audit and certification. So the CMMC and including the ISO standards, specifically the 27000 and 27701 is certifiable, while most of the NIST standards do not have an audit program and certification program in place, right? Very quickly, and then handing over the technical stuff to Erwin. Remember the Cmmi, so we have level 1 up to level 5, and now you see very easy the comparison between the CMMC and the Cmmi. In essence, to quickly go to the levels, you remember level 0 is not mentioned, but actually not implementing it, referring to the couch potatoes here, is out of scope. And if you don't have any program at all, you can consider that as level 0 not implemented. In the level 1, you start doing some exercises, but it's mainly based on simple processes, reactive based. So you're not actually ready to start up to work as a group, and that's exactly where level 2 comes in, is creating documentation, making sure that the processes are known, and with a bit more of exercise you can actually go to level 3, and that means that you can run with a group, you document your processes, you know, on corporate level how the system works. You can hand over knowledge. Multiple people can manage your system. So it's quite an important level also for ISO implementation. And this is pretty much considered as the minimum to get ISO certified. Important part, of course, of level 4, and we already mentioned it before, is that you measure your implementation. So you have metrics numbers, details on a few things, and if you start using these numbers to improve your system, you end up in level 5, which is the optimized system, and that means you're in control of your system, of your services, and you will see actually these levels coming back into the implementation of the Cmmc. This is the main stuff of the implementation. So I will hand over to Aaron right now. So we will go into the implementation part and into the technical discussions. Go ahead, Aaron. It's yours.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for the very nice introduction. Just my 2 cents. So when you first look at the official document, which is very, very detailed, it's also very frightening if you have to be certified, of course, because it's a lot of work to get at a specific level, but it will also be a lot of work to stay at that level. And I'm going to be real honest here. If you look at those 5 levels, you need to be at 3. That's the start. So because like they say, level 2 is intermediate. So it means that you start probably at level 1, but you need to go as fast as possible to level 3. And in the end, you need to be able to get at level 5. And why is this so important? I think everybody has seen last month the big attack using supply chain software with SolarWinds. Well, that was an advanced persistent threat, and the only way that you can protect your organization against these kind of targeted attacks or unknown attacks is that you are at level 5. And that means really that you have, in fact, all those processes and practices in place. And the big difference is that you really need to show that you have them in place, that they are being used, and that you update them, but also that you document them. So you will need to have a full ISMS up and running, documented, and also discussed weekly, monthly, with changes to get all that visibility, not only on a technical level of seeing malware, seeing attacks, having incidents, but also having the proof that you see them, that you handle them, that you manage them, and that you document them. And that's really a big difference with, for example, ISO, where the auditor will just check, do you have the controls, are these documented, and then you will probably pass. But here it goes much farther. You need to be able to prove that you are really doing everything to protect the government data. And so the COI is that you need to protect, which is not that very critical data. For example, the contract that you have with your customer, and that customer is in the list of the Department of Defense, well, that contract as such is already part of that data that you need to protect. Okay, so let me go back, if I can go back 1 slide. Okay, thanks. So this is the overview of the levels, and what is very important, to be at a certain level, you need to have succeeded the previous levels. And that means it is for not only for the processes, but also for the practices. And it also in the guide, it says, if you are, for example, at level 3 for the processes, meaning that, for example, you already have ISO and you have every process documented and you have an ISMS, but the practices are on level 2, then you will get certified for the lowest level, meaning 2. So this is also, I find, a very good initiative to improve the practices implemented in your organization on a technical level, so that it's not only on a paper level, but also really in the field. But that means that to to do that, to get there, will involve a lot of work and cooperation between the different organizations, because you will need to involve your IT environment, your cloud partner, your business architect, your security engineering, to be able to identify all these controls, document them, describe them, tune them, to be able to go to the next level. So we have a huge challenge for this year. Okay. Next slide. Okay. So what is really important, and that's what, like Peter said in the introduction, they have defined a very, very broad scope because they have like 17 practices in different domains. And these domains are, if you look, for example, at another maturity model, like from the Center for Internet Security, CIS, they define only like 20 controls, but they don't look, for example, at situational awareness or physical protection or media protection or maintenance. So there is an overlap, but there are some gaps also there. And what is also very important, that the naming is also a bit different. So you really need to go to the official document and look in the document to see, okay, what is now, for example, in audit and accountability, because accountability, if you're in a bookkeeper, you think that's about your financial statement, but the audit and accountability, for example, means that you audit your events, that somebody's reviewing them, and that's also already on level 2. But level 3, for example, it means that based on the audit logging, that you have alerts, that you need to protect the audit logs, that you have a central repository, all that you have on level 4, automated analysis. So that means that you have a SIEM. And also what is very different with, for example, the CIS critical controls or NIST, is that they always talk about the TTPs. And it's very important that you really study about the TTPs. And these are the techniques, the tactics, and the processes used in a MITRE attack. And you see a lot of security vendors are implementing MITRE attack terminology. For example, you have, if you Google SolarWinds TTPs, you will find some blogs on people that really map the advanced persistent attacks on those TTPs. And that's what they are saying in the CMC as well. You need to be able to, first of all, prove that when there, for example, let's say tomorrow there's a new advanced persistent attack, you should be able to map the TTPs on your environment and immediately see, would you be impacted, yes or no? That's, of course, a very interesting assessment. It's really looking at known attacks, known techniques, known tactics that can impact your organization. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we will go quickly during these. So level 1, it means that you have several domains included and several are excluded. Next one. And that's so for every level. And you see in every level, more and more domains are added to this list. 4, please. Yes, 5, please. Okay, thank you. And the next slide. So it's like that pyramid that we have seen that Peter has shown. So, and then you will see that, for example, for every domain, you have best practices, which are very difficult. Let me explain why. because like a typical standard, they just tell you what you need to do, but they don't tell you how to do that for your specific environment. And so for example, level 1, limit info access to authorized users, connections to external systems. Well, if you give this to a security architect, he will have a lot of work already to be able to say, okay, we are compliant, we have that and that in place. So it's a very, very stringent practice, and it will be very, very difficult because every organization works in a different way with different environments. They are on-premise, hybrid, cloud. So you will need to do that for your full environment where you need to be compliant. So level 2 is already much more, and you need to have privacy notices, you need to implement this privilege, which is of course a very well-known security best practice. But again, where do you need to do that? Do you need to do that on your Active Directory? Do you need to do that in your SAP system? Do you need to do that in your document management system? Do you need to do that everywhere? Because if you have, for example, single sign-on in an environment, you need to have it on your primary source. So you need to limit unsuccessful logons. So you need to have also controls in place that detect unsuccessful logons and that block those attempts. You need to be able to log sessions, you need to monitor remote access. So and your supplier is connecting to your environment to do an update, to do maintenance. Well, you need to be able already on level 2 we are talking, which is an intermediate level, that you monitor that remote access. So this is very, very hard from a technical point of view. And level 3 is segregation of duties. Who can do what and why? Authentication of wireless and encryption, mobile devices, what is stored on the mobile devices, how can they access the corporate network, how do you make sure that they cannot access the confidential data that you need to protect, and do you have audit logs for that? Next, please. And then 4 and 5, like you see, it will become very, very even more technical. Control information flows. It means that you know how your information flows in your organization and that you have full control of that, and that you can review access permissions. So when you see this, it means that you have like this identity governance tool where you can really see, is this user in this group still allowed to access that file share on that server? No or yes. You need to have the full process in place. Do you detect rogue Wi-Fi and so on? So very, very difficult. Next, please. Practices, asset management. Do you have procedures for asset management? Do you have a view of every software and hardware in your environment? And are you able to discover assets on your network? And which is now very hard because most people are working from home. So how can you see that somebody working from home has not installed Netflix on his laptop to watch Netflix when he's not working? But is that allowed by the policy? I doubt it. So it's a very thin line there as well. Next, please. Also for audit and accountability, you need to be able to trace the activities of individual users. On level 2, I mean, if you look at syscontrols, this is the highest level, but here's already on 2. So it's really, really important to have an idea about what is a user doing with his access, and can you see that it's doing something that is not allowed? Are you able to have everything logged, and can you get somebody reviewing that logs? But who can review logs? I mean, if you have a lot of people and you have a lot of data, that's a process that you need to automate. So, and you also need to correlate that info. So this is like a key solution for security incident and event monitoring tool, like you have out there, like as a Sentinel, for example. And then with 4, you need to automate the analysis of that log data so that you can see who did what, when, why, and for what reason. Also be able to identify unreported assets. So it means that you need to be able to have a gap between your documentation platform and the real situation, that you see, okay, maybe I found something in our network and we don't know what it is. Is it authorized to be connected? What data is stored on it? Do we need to shut it down? Where is it physically located? Okay, and another very important one is, of course, awareness and training. And you need to be able to talk about risk and awareness for the key roles in organization, the management, the people that are in control and that are responsible. So, but also IT people like system administrators need to be aware of the security risks associated with their activities and what are the policies and the standards and the procedures related to the security of those systems. It's very important that they know their duties, they need to know what the procedures are, and especially here, they need to be able to document that. And so, for example, I installed a patch, critical patch for Juniper or whatever we had this week. Well, we installed a patch, it means that the vulnerability has been solved, but it should be added to the registry, the documentation that you have in place to showcase that you did that, and that everybody in the organization knows that it has been done. So it requires a lot of formal project management and documentation. Also, security awareness. I don't think that they mean that you give one training in the beginning of the year and that's it. No, it means that you have continuous security awareness training on recognizing and reporting indicators of insider threat. That you see, hey, this is something fishy, or this guy is behaving strange, we need to report it, and we have continuous training to be able to be updated on the newest threats. And that we have on level 4, the awareness on recognizing and that we are able to responding to threats from social engineering or advanced persistent threat actors like the Tesla engineer that was contacted by the Russian guy to install malware in the factory. That when we think there's a breach, that we know what to do when we see suspicious behavior, either when we log on a system or when we see somebody piggybacking at the server room. We need to be able to know that. And of course, that there is practical exercises, meaning we have phishing campaigns when there is a new threat actor or a new threat campaign, that the training is updated to be able to immediately inform the employees in your organization of that new threat, and that they are, for example, able to already notify after the training, hey, this is something that we have witnessed last week or last month, so it's possible that we already had an attack. Next slide, please. Configuration management, if you already know the critical controls, this is a very important one. And I think that with all the ransomware attacks and the Petya attacks and the non-Petya, and in the past with other virus attacks that we had, that a lot of people are already doing patching, documenting how they need to install hardware, software, firmware, that they change default passwords. But you see that there's already a lot that you need to do on level 2. For example, control and monitor user installed software. It means that you have something running on your endpoint that monitors that users are installing software. Of course, the best practice is don't give them admin rights that they cannot install software, but sometimes that's not possible, especially for the dangerous species in your environment, which we call developers and IT people that always have full access. So you need to see that when something changes, that there's a tracking, there's a review, but there's also an approval or disapproval of a change on your organizational system. So typical example, we need to open something on the firewall. how does that work nowadays? You pick up the phone, you call the firewall administrator and say, hey, we are rolling out a new environment. It needs to have these and these ports open to that internal IP address. Can you open the ports for me, please? And when you know the guy, 9 out of 10 times he will say, okay, no problem, I will do that. But here you need to have a full configuration management and change management process. Like, for example, in a ServiceNow environment, that when you want to change something, you create a ticket is approved by the manager, a ticket is approved by security manager, then it's implemented, the ticket gets updated, there is a link to the firewall policy, there's a timestamp on it, how long should that firewall rule be there, when do we need to review it, but also, and then we're still on level 2, analyze the insecurity impact of changes prior to implementation. So it means that there is like a board meeting or governance meeting to say, hey, do we want to have that firewall port open? Do we approve this before even doing the technical request? So it will increase the formal workflow. It will increase implementation time, because when something is really formalized, well, you need to have follow the process to do that. Application whitelisting. Which applications are allowed to run on a specific machine, on a specific endpoint, means that you know which applications are allowed. And also level 5 is that you verify the integrity of critical software. And this, for example, if you look at the SolarWinds attack, this should be able to detect that there was a backdoor in that system, because at the moment there was a system update of the SolarWinds software on your machine, the integrity should have passed because it was signed by SolarWinds. So on this level, you will not be able to identify it, but you should be able to get an alert saying, hey, there was an update of that software running in the environment. Are we okay with that? What were, for example, the changes? And then, because you have a config management in place, you should be able to see that that backdoor that was signed by SolarWinds did a download of an additional malware, and at that moment your security should get an alert because it's unauthorized software running on your machine, and that the software that was running has no access to download that, and that there's control on your network level as well. Okay, next one, please. So you see we need to speed up a bit because we have like 13 minutes, but another one, identify and classify users, require authentication to allow access. Sometimes these practices, if you're in the security world, you think, well, this is very obvious, but you need to consider that there are so many organizations out there that still need to implement a lot of security. So here you say, well, if you need access to something, you need to implement authentication. Bam, level 1. And then level 2 is, well, you need to manage the passwords. Strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, use password managers, don't write them down on a post-it and stick it on your screen, all that. So it's very important. So here you see identity management and multi-factor authentication is level 3. And like I said in the beginning, this is where you need to go, level 3. That's the only level that I think that you, if you are there, that you can start thinking about getting to level 4 and 5. Okay, the next one is also very important and so often not implemented in most organizations, incident response. Because if you don't have logging, if you don't have a SIEM, you will not be able to do any incident response. I mean, if you look at the TTPs of the SolarWinds attack, make a reflection on your own environment. Would you be able to see if that supply chain attack was impacting your organization? If you think yes, then you're fine. but I'm sure that most of you will find it very hard to get an answer in 5 minutes, because you need to have logging on your DNS, you need to have logging on your servers and have software inventory. You need to have track changes of software on your servers. You need to be able to see traffic going through your firewall to those command and control centers. You need to be able to see that there is malware on your machine that was not detected by your antivirus or your next-gen malware detection. So that's very important. And here, level 4, Security Operations Center. Very important, because Security Operations Center will do the proactive hunting for those threats. Know who is attacking you. Level 4, track and document incidents. So the ISMS that you need to implement need to have also a huge capability to track and document those incidents as well. And what is also very important, I see in a lot of organizations there's a huge gap in the skills, in the expertise that is needed to be able to do incident response. There is a huge difference in setting up a system securely and be able to look at log data, to look at alerts from your antivirus, to look at alerts for PowerShell doing nasty things, to look at DNS requests, to be able to have a good feeling about what's going on in your environment. So there we will have a lot of work. Next slide, please. Then media protection. Where is information stored? And I think this is typically implemented because of people losing USB sticks or hard drives, or leaving laptops in trains that are not encrypted and store data, the confidential data that you need to protect, but also not only on a digital system, but also on paper. So it's like a lot, and you need to be able to mark media. You need to have a policy that you are not allowed to use USB or other mobile media, like, or for example, an SD card, or need to be implement encryption. So crypto protection, it's not protecting against crypto lockers, but it means that you encrypt data when you need to store this on a digital media for transportation or whatever that you would need to do that. Okay, next one. Personal security. It means that when you want to hire somebody, that you will do a screening. Okay, or that you screen internally, is this user the right guy to have access to the confidential information stored on that system?
This is one of the areas, Erwin, where the ISO 27000 has a bit more detail, meaning the HR security is an important part, where you see the personnel lifecycle being implemented, meaning onboarding, offboarding, change of positions. So yeah, it's rather limited in this case. This is one of the few exceptions where the Cmmc is rather technically focused on level 2 and no more details are added, while the ISO 27001 is adding more requirements to do it, meaning what you need to do is not how you need to do it exactly as you mentioned.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm a technical guy, so I don't look at all that soft skill stuff. For example, this one is not also in the physical critical controls, but physical protection. Again, here they want to prevent that somebody walks in the server room and gets out with the server or the hard drive or portable data by plugging in a USB and stealing the data. So they really want you to have this in place, and that's already tackled by ISO, of course, but it's again a very important protection that you need to have. Next, please. And then, of course, recovery. Have backups, test backups, have resilient data backups. So it means that your backups, that they work, and that they are complete. That when you have to restore a system, that you're not like, oh no, we forgot to include the configuration of the application, or no, we forgot to include the database or the file system. And so it needs to be able to do that very quickly, and you need to be able to test it and of course document it. And level 5 means that you have redundancy of your data center. Of course, if you're using full cloud, then it's already handled by your cloud provider. But if you only have one data center, it means that you need to have another one in place, which is of course very expensive.
Also keep in mind, if you're using cloud, that backup is not always available, so you have rolled back and probably some backup data. But for example, in malware or in crypto malware, for example, if crypto and ransomware is closing down your data, it will be very likely also being enclosed or closed actually in your cloud solution. So backups is certainly also for cloud customers a very important part of the thinking you need to do to have a decent backups and maybe even offline backups.
Well, there I also have a good tip. It's not because that your cloud provider is doing backup or providing redundancy. For example, a situation where your credit card is not working anymore, they can close down your access to the data and then it's gone. So always make sure that even when you're using cloud, that you have I call it off cloud backup, because it's your data. So do backup away from your cloud provider, either to another cloud provider or to a cloud backup service, but that you still can have data access, because it's your data, it's your intellectual property, it's your code, to make sure that you can always deploy it somewhere else, or that you have it in case of safety. Yes. Risk management, this is my cup of tea. So it means for on a technical level that you do continuous assessments, scanning for vulnerabilities, do risk assessment when there is a new attack vector, when there are new threats. Level 4, you need threat profiling and threat intelligence, know what's coming, make sure that assume breach and all that stuff, because we are all after all targets when you have an internet visibility. And then also have like in level 5, it's an exception process for non-wireless software that includes mitigation techniques, so that you know why some software is running. Next, please. Security assessments. Do you have a security plan? What is your architecture? How are the requirements implemented? How do you have connections, like for example site-to-site VPN with suppliers, partners, customers, cloud? Do you have controls in place that monitor them, that your application is running like expected? Do you have plans of actions? Do you have a security strategy to improve their security? Do you have red teaming, and that you have like an internal testing team to break your application security? Yes, next. Security awareness.
It's rather environmental. Yeah, I'm not sure the title is still correct. I need to double check this one. Aaron, but
situational awareness.
Yes.
Situational awareness. It means you're not sitting on an island. You're not in your ivory tower. You're not having the only problem, but you communicate with your peers, you are listening, you're subscribed to the alerts from the Department of Defense, you have a threat hunting internally to make sure that when there's a new attack, that it's not in your environment, that you have a network and system security to detect and share indicators of compromise and all that. So it's also a very important one, which is often forgotten. Next. And of course, system and communications protection, networking, firewalling, internal segmentation. Make sure that your end user is not logging in as a domain admin on this endpoint, but it's using like a privileged workstation, physical isolation, logical isolation, threat intelligence based on DNS requests, firewall blocks, IP addresses, communication. This is a very, very huge one. And to get at level 3, I think that it's so much work already to do. But it's very, very good. I think if you look at the practices, this is a very important one to start with to prevent ransomware outbreaks, for example. Next. And then, of course, make sure that you identify and report information system flaws, that you protect against malicious code, that you have anti-malware, next generation detection of attacks, EDR, MDR, all those kind of things, that you have spam protection, that you detect email forgery, that you can detect phishing attacks, spear phishing, sandboxing when somebody's sending you an email, behavioral analysis. Yes, I think we just got that headline. Maybe there's another slide, Peter. I think we missed. Nope.
That was the last one, Aaron. So yeah, a massive implementation, as you see, and this was exactly also the purpose actually of this this discussion, actually to see that actually the guidelines and the thresholds that the Department of Defense has set are quite important. So thank you very much for the explanation, Aaron, on that one. There are a few extra things to catch back to close down for the session. Of course, this is highly focused on cybersecurity, and yeah, we got one of the questions is what's the difference between information security and cybersecurity. Just be aware that everything that is cyber is actually related to internet connection. Of if you have systems published on the internet or internet accessible systems, that's mainly the focus actually of this system, of course, and as explained by Erwin, we see lots of attacks coming up from that side right now, and that's where the importance of the Cmmc actually comes in. Just the last part of the slide deck is linking back the Cmmc model rather back to the Cmmi. Remember that we had these discussions, and this Cmmi model is existing already for quite a long time. So it's not that strange that they used the Cmmc system and building on the level of Cmmi. Originally, it came down from application development and so on, but it has become a widely accepted evaluation system or appraisal system actually to understand how mature a process is. And this is the last part of the slides, that using this way of working that is highly developed now by Cmmc, you can actually apply that to your own systems, and be aware that the as you see right now is that this evaluation, maturity evaluation, is not a system-wide evaluation. It's not your entire enterprise that has a system, but be aware that yeah, you need to check the maturity of every single process in combination with how you develop it. And Cmmc makes a statement that the minimum level that you get is the final certification level that you will get, and the Cmmi is making a slightly different approach in that sense. For Cmmi, you need to look at the process level only, so that's where the difference is. The other thing is that if you want to evaluate how your system is doing, not only on cyber but also on the enterprise level, information security level, and that's where the 27000 series comes in. You can actually apply the same method, the same evaluation built on the Cmmc actually to evaluate all the stuff. And what I want to quickly to show you here is also that if you do that evaluation, first of all, you can get pretty graphical evaluation of your systems. You can also see the gaps very easily, and you can also evaluate very easily where you need to spend some money on and what's the priority of implementations in this case. And it's essentially the difference, for example, in this current situation, what you see in the red line here in this diagram. If you need to grow to the next level, the green, sorry, in the first level is the yellow one, and then in long term into the green one. You actually can detect visually very easily what are the gaps and where you need to spend first priority on solving the issues in that sense. I took a few examples, and it's very easily built actually with an Excel sheet if you want. You can actually also, not only for the modules and the clauses that are in the management part of the ISO 27000, but of course in the controls and the annex of the 27001, you can actually do exactly the same exercise. Just to give you an example, you can easily find where the systems are matching. For example, here in this case, in this example, you see that the current state of your crypto and the implementation of your encryption is matching the expected level, so that's perfect. While, for example, the biggest gap you will find out in this case, for example, I added another section which is out of the ISMS, but in this case I added the GDPR implementation as an example as the biggest gap. So you can actually follow up your system quite easily, and if you do this kind of evaluations on a regular basis, monthly, 2 monthly, bi-monthly, you can actually follow up your system and also explain to your management very visually how to follow up your systems. And this is also where the maturity comes into managing your ISMS system on a regular basis in that sense, right? This is pretty much the last slide actually of the presentation itself. You will find out also that we added some more details and references also in the slide deck. Lots of these documents and things we showed will be mentioned in the slide deck. I will not go into detail during the presentations, but you will have the slides available. So I saw quite some questions passing by in the chat. Will the slides be available? Yes, and we will publish also the recording together with the slides, and we will answer all the questions on the LinkedIn page. Arjen, I hand it over back to you.
Yes, thank you, Peter. Thank you once again for delivering this very detailed and outstanding and informative session. Before moving with Q&A, I would like to inform you that PECB offers courses on ISO 27001 and ISO 27701, which help you show your dedication in implementing and managing privacy-related frameworks, and most importantly, get a certificate which is recognized worldwide. Now, I think that due to time limitation, we will be able to answer 1 or 2 questions related to today's session. Before going to that, I just want to say that we are happy to inform you that we have been nominated for the Best Cybersecurity Education Provider Award for this year by the Cybersecurity Excellence Awards. We have received this award in 2019 and 2020, and we're excited to be nominated again this year. If you believe that we deserve this award, we invite you to vote for us by following the steps in the link that I sent in your chat box. Now, let's go ahead and answer the first question. So this will be a joint question on Cmmc. So in what aspects can Cmmc affect an organization outside of US? And the second part, if I implement the ISO 27001 and obtain the certification, can I map my ISMS to Cmmc and seem to be compliant?
As explained, the Cmmc is very specifically organized and maintained by the US Department of Defense. So it's a prime condition to be accepted as a contractor or as a vendor for the Department of Defense, and hence, this is exactly the reason why also, as explained by Erwin, the requirements are pretty stiff, pretty high in that sense. On the other hand, due to its compatibility with the Cmmi and ISO 27001, you can perfectly use it as a guideline. And as explained by Aaron, there's a lot of detailed guidance in the Cmmc. So yes, it's absolutely useful to implement it, even without considering certification or even without the need of acceptance by the Department of Defense. The other way around, and that's the second part of the question, if you implement ISO 27001, the approach is slightly different. So 27001 ISMS is enterprise security, which is considering processes in the company, enterprise level, internal, external, and of course cyber, meaning internet related technology is part of it. So you can use CMMC or CMMI, or like, for example, also the syscontrols to implement ISO 27000. The other way around, if you have ISO 27000 certification, it's not mapping exactly to cyber only. Of course, if you focus and scope your system on cybersecurity, you can perfectly use the syscontrols and the CMCC guidance actually to implement your ISO 27000, but due to the scoping definitions, both of them are different, and cybersecurity or internet security is part of the ISO 27000 in that sense. So be careful if you are certified for 27000 and you try to apply for the CMMC, there's very likely some additional controls to be implemented to be compliant with the CMMC.
Thank you, Peter. Now, to conclude this session, another question on, do you have any suggestions on, slight suggestions on how to adapt the SOA from the ISO 27001 to ISO 27701?
Yeah, that's a bit slightly actually a topic that was also covered in the previous sessions, but still it's quite important. What's the difference with the PIM system is that in the ISMS system, you're looking at enterprise level processes, while the 27701, the privacy management systems, is looking mainly and actually only at the privacy data, so the personal data in that sense. And what you will see that if you look at the ISO standard itself is exactly referencing to the Delta. So one main topic and explained by the ISO standard is changing terminology from enterprise security to the enterprise security plus data protection. And plus, which is also mentioned today, there are some quite important processes you need to implement in the PIM systems. For example, incident management, data breach reporting. So there are some processes mainly which require compatibility with GDPR that are added to the SOA in that sense. And there are a few of these measures being mentioned in 701 that needs to be adopted to the SOA. So that's also one of the reasons why it's very smart actually to plan for your ISMS certification first and then later on grow your system for certification into the PIM system.
Great. Thank you, Peter and Erwin, again for this outstanding session. And I would also like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. Once again, this session will be recorded and posted on our website and YouTube channel, along with the slides of the presentation, and will also be sent to your email in a couple of days. Thank you all for attending today's session and stay safe. Have a great day.